What is assessment? According to the book Assessment and Student Success in a Differentiated Classroom, classroom assessment is the process of collecting, synthesizing, and interpreting information in a classroom for the purpose of aiding a teacher's decision making. That is, in order for a teacher to effectively know where his or her students are at in their own knowledge of a particular subject, what aspects of the subject require further instruction or more in-depth instruction, whether students are improving or increasing their knowledge of a particular subject, the teacher must assess work produced from his or her students. Our current system of education relies heavily on tests and quizzes as a means of determining how well students are doing and how much they are learning in a particular course. Is this an effective means of assessment for students? Does it give an accurate description of a student's knowledge on a certain unit in the course? Let's take a look at an example. Consider two students, Maggie and John. John is an A student who does quite well in his math classes. He understands the material quite well and usually ranks in the top 10%. Maggie struggles with math. Sometimes she understands the concepts being taught, however, most of the time she becomes very frustrated with her lack of knowledge in the course. Maggie ensures that she keeps up with the homework that is assigned. John doesn't feel the need to practice as much. Both John and Maggie are completing their grade 9 year of mathematics. The course culminates in a final exam. Throughout the semester, a variety of tests and quizzes are taken by students, and homework is taken in by the teacher at the end of each chapter for completion marks. Maggie has done quite poorly on most of the tests and quizzes, but has a homework mark of 100% since she did all the homework. John, however, has a low homework mark. On the exam, Maggie, who spent the night before attempting to memorize as many practice questions from the notes as she could, managed to memorize the correct material and obtained a final class grade of 65%. John, however, has an off day on the day of the exam and does the most poorly he has done on a test all semester. He ends with a final class mark of 70%. Are these grades accurate representations of their knowledge? Even though John has showed throughout the semester that he knows at least 80% of the material of the course, his low exam mark and his low homework mark have drastically dropped his final grade. Maggie, who has consistently showed a lack of proficiency in the topic of math, has received an average mark due to her high homework mark. The assessments used in this course do not give an accurate portrayal of each student's knowledge. Now Maggie will be passed on to grade 10 math only knowing at best 50% of the required material and will likely struggle with math 10, becoming immensely frustrated and potentially growing a large dislike or hatred for math. John, who usually sees A's on his report card for math, will now see for the first time a C+. This may cause him to become discouraged and lose engagement for the course. Paul Tomlinson and Tanya Moon write in their book Assessment and Student Success in a Differentiated Classroom that error is inherent in assessment. Because assessments are constructed by human beings and taken by human beings, they are always likely to be imperfect measures of a student's true knowledge of the topic. They also note that good assessment is reliable. In the previous example, the assessments being used were not reliable. This leads to the topic of differentiated assessment. According to the book Differentiated Assessment Strategies, One Tool Doesn't Fit All, differentiated assessment is an ongoing process through which teachers gather data before, during, and after instruction from multiple sources to identify learners' needs and strengths. Instead of jumping into a new semester of mathematics or any subject, teachers need to assess the knowledge of their new student. Although it would be nice that all students coming into a new class had the prerequisite knowledge required for the course, this isn't the case. As teachers, we need to find ways of assessing our students so that we can get a good understanding of where the students are at in the course, if any need requirements, if any are light years beyond that of the other students. Using this assessment, we will be able to determine where to go next with instruction. When it comes to differentiated assessment, teachers sometimes have misconceptions. Students may have different levels of knowledge within a particular classroom, and differentiated assessment attempts to provide methods that will accurately assess all students throughout a semester, regardless of their knowledge level. This doesn't mean, however, that each student is working towards a different goal within the class. All students are working towards the same content goals. Differentiation does not imply that teachers should grade students who struggle easier and students who are proficient in the class harder. All students, or most students, should be graded against the same criteria. Tomlinson and Moon write, what a differentiated classroom does is provide an environment that maximizes student opportunity to achieve and, when possible, move beyond those criteria. Formative assessment is arguably very important in differentiated assessment. Tomlinson and Moon describe it as being when a teacher gathers evidence about student performance, interprets the evidence, and uses this evidence to make decisions about next steps in instructions that are likely to be better focused or informed than the decisions would have been without the evidence. This helps teachers know that students are progressing. Formative assessments, which contain a large amount of feedback, will give teachers information on where students are struggling or what they should continue to work on. Traditionally, if a student does poorly on a chapter or unit test, the class continues to the next chapter or unit. This can be detrimental in a math course, as chapters build on each other. It doesn't make sense for a student to write a test or move on to the next chapter if they haven't learned the required material. Formative assessment will help reduce students from becoming overwhelmed or frustrated with misunderstood material due to a lack of understanding in the previous chapter. Grading can also pose problems in differentiated assessment. Lorna Maxine Earle says, in regards to grades, that for some students, the certainty of praise and success in school has become a drug. They continually need more. For many other students, year upon year of not good enough has eroded their intellectual self-confidence and resulted in a kind of mind-numbing malaise. Grades should only happen occasionally. The primary focus of a classroom, according to Tomlinson and Moon, should be on planning, teaching, learning, feedback, and measurement. A very good analogy on formative and summative assessment is given by Robert Stake, who describes formative assessment as taking place when a cook tastes the soup, and summative assessment when the guests taste the soup. When the chef tastes the soup, he still has time to adjust. When the guests taste, there is only judgment. Therefore, summative assessments shouldn't occur until a teacher deems a student is necessarily ready. Tomlinson and Moon outline 9 main concepts to keep in mind when grading students. Number 1. Base grades on clearly specified learning goals. Make sure students are aware of what they are being assessed on, for example, particular content or core competencies. Number 2. Use grades that are criterion-based, not comparative or norm-based. Don't use grades to rank students in the classroom. Number 3. Don't overgrade student work. Not everything students do needs to be graded. When students are practicing or still learning, they aren't yet at a stage where their work is necessarily ready to be given a grade. Number 4. Use only quality assessments. Trick or surprise questions are not effective measurements of student knowledge. Number 5. Reduce grade fog. Grades should be used to give a description of a student's knowledge. Therefore, other aspects, such as late assignments, homework, behavior, participation, etc., should be left out of this grade or inputted elsewhere. Number 6. Eliminate mathematical grade fog. Averaging grades doesn't always do justice to the student. Some assessments might be worth more than others. Averaging also doesn't pay tribute to outliers, which may give a lot of information on students' knowledge. Giving zeros also muddies the waters, so to speak, when assigning grades to students. Number 7. Grade more heavily later in a grading cycle rather than earlier. If a student does poorly on a test during the beginning of the semester, but does quite well on a test near the end of the course, the end test should be given more weight as it shows the student has learned and improved in the subject. Number 8. When it's time for report cards, use 3P grading. School isn't just about learning core subject knowledge, it's also about increasing collaborative work skills, quality of work, responsibility, etc. Therefore, it is also important to assess students via 3 different Ps: performance or product, process, and progress. These assessments should all be individual and not amalgamated. Number 9. Open up the assessment and grading process. It is important and effective to have ongoing discussions with both the student and the student's parents on the student's progress in a course. Grades shouldn't be some mysterious secretive thing that students receive, not knowing how they will fare out. Are grades absolutely necessary? This is something that is being more and more questioned. Do grades really increase student learning? One school in New York, New Day Academy, has begun creating student e-portfolios. These portfolios were created by the students and contain a variety of assignments and pieces of work that students had created throughout the year. Assignments that only require rote skills or recalls, such as tests or quizzes, are not included in the portfolios. Instead, different projects or assignments that allow students to demonstrate deep understanding rather than the broad bank of facts and skills required by many standardized tests are included. Since students chose what they wanted to be included, they became very invested in creating these portfolios and were inclined to do so. At the end of the year, students presented their portfolios to a group of students and teachers. Students were able to see their own progression throughout the year and took ownership and pride over what they had accomplished. This is just one example of an assessment that is not test or exam based. Dave Martin, a math teacher in Alberta, is another teacher who strives to eliminate tests and quizzes from his curriculum. When assessing students, he allows them to choose whatever method they like to present the knowledge they have learned throughout the semester. Martin figured out that getting rid of chapter tests frees up approximately 1 month worth of teaching and learning time for students. A diverse class requires differentiated instruction and therefore differentiated assessment. Knowing where every student in the class is at in terms of their own learning and knowledge throughout the entire semester will allow teachers to decide where to go next with their instruction. Not all students learn the same, and therefore not all students should be assessed the same.
Created using Powtoon.